you flush the toilet, you are actually flushing a biological report card that contains more information about your health than most blood tests your doctor is running.
So we are going there today. I mean, all the way there. We are talking about poop, my friends. And I know what you're thinking. These guys are always talking about poop. And really, a whole episode devoted to it, though? But here's the thing, right? Dr. B has been literally telling me for years that your poop is trying to talk to you. And I'm like, hold up, though, man. I don't want to hear what this thing has to say. But then Dr. B hit me with the stat that genuinely blew my mind. And I realized, Dr. B, this was a show that, frankly, we need to do.
It's like a reverse poop whisperer, Chuck, but instead of you whispering to the poop is whispering back. And I can tell you that as a gastroenterologist, I've spent my years looking deeply into this stuff, sometimes against my will, where people take out their poop selfie and put it in my face. Nonetheless, this is literally my job. And I think that the most reason that people don't want to talk about poop is, part of it is like, hey, it's off limits. We're not supposed to talk about this. Oh, it's just waste. Oh, it's stinky. Okay, I get it. You just want to flush it, forget it, move on with your day. But here's what 20 years of research has completely overturned. Your poop is not just a dump. It's not just stinky. There's information there. 55% of the actual weight of your stool, more than half, Chuck, is living and dead microorganisms. Microorganisms. Your microbiome. Your microbiome. Bacteria, fungi, viruses. Those are easier words for me. So when you flush the toilet, you are actually flushing a biological report card that contains more information about your health than most blood tests your doctor is running.
I'm having kind of like a Frankenstein moment where you're talking about the poop. I'm like, it's alive. It's alive. So you're really telling us that more than half of what we flush is still living?
I mean, it's either alive or it was alive pretty recently. So, and as if that's not wild enough, Chuck, we now have studies showing that what's in your poop can predict your risk of dementia, that it's connected to your kidney function, that scientists have literally transferred obesity from one person to another using a poop transplant. And there is a vault, top secret vault, like this seed vault that we can discuss in the Arctic, that's there exclusively for human feces so that we make sure that we never lose these microbial species that are so important to us as humans.
It's a secret poop vault. Well, I don't know how secret it is. It's a stinky poop vault.
Yeah, well, it's not that much of a secret if we're here talking about it on the Gut Insiders, but nonetheless.
Yeah, man. I'm in for it, though, man. So school us up. Let's talk about it.
All right, so today we're going to break down the science of poop, what it actually is, what it's telling you, what it can do, what's quietly destroying your microbiome and messing up your poops. And I promise you by the end of this episode, you will never look at your toilet the same.
All right. I don't want to look in the toilet, but I do want to like picture a pie chart, right? Let's slice up this pie. So when we're talking about how a poo is constructed, how much of it is water? How much of it is this live waste that you're talking about? How much of it is dead? What else is in there? Can you break it down for us, man?
Is this a poop pie, Chuck?
A poop pie. Yes, sir. It is indeed a poop pie.
Thank goodness I don't eat minced meat anymore because I'll never be able to look at it the same. Let alone a shepherd's pie. All right.
I'll take the number 2 special, please. All right. What you got?
This poop pie. So if you break it down, 75% is actually water. All right. So that leaves us with 25%, but that's a nice hefty slice of the poop pie. So 75% of the weight of your poop is actually water because thankfully, hopefully, it's not totally dehydrated. It actually contains water. If it's totally dehydrated, we got problems. That's called constipation. We'll talk about that. But what's left, this 25%, this triangle, 55% of that is actually coming from microorganisms. I'm struggling with this word, Chuck. Your microbiome. 55% of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna practice offline here. But
You gotta think.
nonetheless, like the point is that more than half of the weight is not what you would think it is. You would think that it's your fiber. You would think that it's the excrement of your food. It's not. That more than half of this is actually microbial in origin. So in other words, when we look down into the toilet bowl, what we should see is not waste. We should actually see that's your microbiome.
So if we were to actually like put like a slab of doo doo, that sounds so nasty, a slab of doo doo on a slide and take a look at it, you're gonna see some living organisms just kind of swirling around in there, huh?
Oh, 100%. You're going to see some living ones. You're going to see some that are not living, but they are coming from the same origin, which is that they were once alive inside your microbiome. And this is the story that is being told. By the way, this is the entire reason that gut testing can even be done at all, because the gut testing is basically a way in which we can try to understand the story that exists within your poop. But I said it's 55%. So if we're doing the math, I know we're like slicing and dicing this pie up, but that leaves us 45%. That must be something else. So the question is like, what is left over? And it's not like the leftover uh prime rib that you had the other day.
Mm,
Typically this is going to be it's going to be undigested fiber, because there is some fiber, the insoluble fiber that does not get digested and absorbed. So it's going to be there no matter what. That's the stuff that sweeps through. There's going to be cells. So these are typically the cells from your gut lining. Chuck, you and I have discussed this before. Every 3 to 5 days, the entirety of the lining inside your intestines is replaced.
mm.
And when those cells are replaced, what do you think happens to the old cells? Many of them fall off and they pass through and they become a part of the bowel movement. The other thing that you'll find in there is bile. So, why is our poop brown? The reason why it's brown is actually bile, which comes from the liver and helps us to digest and absorb fat. And we know this because one of the things that can occur in people that have gallstones, if a gallstone gets stuck and actually blocks their bile ducts, people stop having brown poops. Their poop goes this weird off gray, ashen, like ghostly ghost poops. It's like a weird color, Chuck.
Can I hop in here and talk from experience about this? It's story time, Dr. B.
Okay.
Um, when I had my gallbladder removed, they told me that I may see what they called clay colored poo. And sure enough, dude, I was pooping Casper there for a few days. And that's because I was not producing bile for a hot moment until everything kind of situated itself in there, and then things kind of returned to looking normal. But it is quite concerning when you first see that, plop down. You're like, what in the hell did I just do?
That is like one of there's by the way many colors that your poop can become. And so this Casper, this ghostly the friendly ghost poop
It
is
was
one of
spooky.
them. And we have others, and all of them sort of tell a story. So, like for example, you could have black poops. So, out of curiosity, do you know what causes black poops, Chuck?
Oh yeah, because I've had those too. That would be blood in the stool, my good man.
Yes. So, blood that's in the stool, particularly blood that's been sitting in there for a while. So, many times, this is actually blood that's coming from like the upper intestines. Like if you have a stomach ulcer and that's bleeding, that can cause a black stool. We have a word for that. We call that melena. And a gastroenterologist, such as myself, we're able to detect melena with our nose from like literally across the hospital. I'm not exaggerating.
You can smell it?
Oh, 100% you can smell it. It has a highly distinct smell, and that smell travels. So you have someone that's like in one room, you might even have the door closed, and I'm on the other side of the hospital talking to a patient, and my head swivels. What's that? Because
What
I'm like a hound dog, Chuck.
is it because they're passing gas and it's really rancid, or what smell are you picking up here, man?
No, no, no. This is the melena. So the issue is that they okay. You're making a valid point here. Why would we be smelling melena? Or they must be passing gas or passing something. So when we bleed, Blood is a cathartic. So what that means is it forces you to start moving your bowels. So a
Hmm.
person who has a bleeding stomach ulcer, the way that this can show up, one of the first signs can be they start having diarrhea, and that diarrhea turns black. And it's got this horrible smell. So you're not just seeing it, you're smelling it. And that's how you know that something is up. But bleeding is not the only cause of black stool. Out of curiosity, do you know what else can cause black stool? I don't mean to put you on the spot and quiz you here, Chuck. I hope that the listeners at home right now are shouting at their radio in front of their friends.
In
What's going
front of the
on?
radio, I love it.
Yeah.
You're speaking to the old radio guy in me. So I mean, I would imagine then it would have to do with like food dyes, food colorings. So it's like if you eat beets, like you can pee red sometimes. Maybe there's a little bit of red in your stool from that. Maybe some food has a black effect like that.
Okay. So there are foods that give a black effect. It's blueberries.
Mm.
All right. So blueberries can actually cause black stools if you load up on blueberries. So you just went to the blueberry farm. They allow you to eat while you pick. You loaded up, you ate 3 pounds of blueberries. What's going to happen the next day? You're going to notice your stool turns black. The other thing, I don't know if anyone's ever noticed this, but if you have an upset stomach and then you go and you take Pepto Bismol, the bismuth that's in Pepto Bismol will actually turn your stool black. So it's something to be aware of. Now, it's a normal shape stool and it doesn't have the horrible smell that the melena has. So, but it is an important distinction. You have to have the frame of mind, the context to know, oh, that black stool, I just took Pepto Bismol yesterday. Whereas if you see this black stool that's getting loose, sticky, smells horrible, that's melena. You need to call your doctor immediately.
I want to go back to what you were saying about some of the stool being made up of dead cells that you're shedding. I know that part of the problem with constipation is you're just reabsorbing toxins and things like that back into your system. Do these dead cells become toxic even though your own body has produced them as opposed to it being a foreign substance?
So this sort of opens up into a bigger conversation, Chuck. So dead cells themselves are not inherently toxic, but when the transit of your stool is slow, so let me translate that. When things are not moving through quickly, right? It's like sluggish bowels. It typically is going to occur when you're not consuming sufficient fiber. Fiber is like what maintains the rhythm. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's feeding the microbiome. You have a healthier microbiome as a result of this. Those microbes are unlocking short chain fatty acids like butyrate. The butyrate is working on your gut barrier. The butyrate is working on your immune system to suppress and reduce inflammation. By the way, inflammation slows down gut transit, right? And ultimately, the microbes can impact gut serotonin. 95% of serotonin is within our gut. So fiber is what helps to maintain the rhythm of the gut. And when that fiber is present, those microbes will always preferentially opt for the fiber. It's their favorite food. Of course, like you present them their favorite food, that's what they're going to eat. But if the fiber is not on the table, which is the story for 95% of Americans, then the microbes are hungry and they will find something else to eat. If you're not going to give them fiber, they will find something else. So what do they turn to, Chuck? Protein.
Mm.
And the issue is that, so protein in balance with fiber, that's not my concern because again, the fiber will feed the microbes. But protein in the absence of fiber, this is how we create trouble. Because what ends up happening is the microbes start to preferentially consume the protein and they produce compounds, compounds that can actually be considered toxic. We call these uremic compounds, Chuck. So an example of this is something called p-cresol sulfate, and another is indoxyl sulfate. Right? So these are what we call uremic toxins. They can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. they're actually directly neurotoxic, meaning that they affect your brain in a negative way. They're coming from the gut. And this is an interesting thing to point out, Chuck, because there was a study that was published in 2023 of 110,000 people. And what they looked at was bowel movement frequency. How often are you going? And what they found was that people who were going in a way that's like basically we would label them as constipation. So like they only have a bowel movement once every 3 days or less. Those people had a 73% higher likelihood of developing cognitive decline.
Mm.
And when they looked at the age of their brain was 3 years older than it was supposed to be. So they'd added basically their aging in their brain was accelerated in a bad way. So it's kind of an interesting thing to consider that like basically if we don't consume fiber, we will flip the microbiome towards protein fermentation. In the process of doing that, we will release these uremic toxins. By the way, those uremic toxins don't just travel to the brain. They also have been shown to cause damage to the kidneys. And this is actually creates a way in which through the gut connected to the kidney, you can actually affect kidney function. Here's the key though. This is the logic that I want the listeners to understand. That in the absence of fiber, the gut will actually ferment protein. And because that fiber is not present, the gut is not in rhythm. So then it slows down. And when it slows down, it manifests as constipation. And so then what you see in your toilet bowl is constipation. There's a story there. This is the point that I want to make. There's a story there that starts with understanding what you see in your toilet.
Yeah, and they've actually developed a scale to help you comprehend what you're seeing in your toilet because, a fiber rich diet, that poo is probably going to look vastly different than somebody that's eating a diet that does not have any fiber, right? You're quite literally at that point pooping rocks. Shall we say? I think that they call this like, and obviously, I mean, you would know this in a second, like the Bristol Stool Scale or something like that.
Yeah, the Bristol Stool Scale. Yeah. Uh, when I was in my fellowship, there was a person who was working on the research to like replace the Bristol Stool Scale. I don't think anything ever came of it because we're not talking about it. But I was like very excited about the possibility that this person would use their last name to name the stool scale because I thought it would be very funny if like, you know, if it were me, I just had a Bulsiewicz in the toilet bowl right there. Right.
I dropped a Bulsiewicz.
I just dropped a
So
Bulsiewicz
good.
5. I just dropped a Bulsiewicz 5 and I'm feeling great. So, this is how you secure your legacy, Chuck. Your life means something.
Yeah,
Um,
dude.
all right, Bristol Stool Scale. So, for those of you who have not heard about this, let me give you the backstory. Let's go back to the 1990s. And basically, astute researchers in Bristol in the UK, so this is the city of Bristol, they said, you know what, we would like to develop a way to understand like the different types of poop that people are reporting to us because there's a pattern. There's like we keep hearing the same types. So they developed the Bristol Stool Scale, which contains 7 unique types. And so Bristol 1 is like a rock hard rabbit turd. A Bristol 2 is if you took a bunch of marbles and like stuffed them together with Play-Doh. All right. So it's like a lumpy bumpy, it's a bunch of rocks stuffed together. All right. A Bristol 3 is a sausage, but that sausage is kind of dried out and it's got cracks in it. So I've just named 3 forms of constipation, and 1 is the worst.
Mm.
Now 4 is like, yo, we are having a great day. It's 8 in the morning. I just took a walk outside. I just had a cup of coffee. By the way, you would be doing these things if you listen to our circadian rhythm episode. All right. I just had my coffee. I just took a walk outside. I just went to the bathroom and I dropped a glorious Bristol
Bulsiewicz.
4.
Oh, Bristol Fort. Nah, man, we're
Bulsiewicz
coining it.
4.
A Bulsiewicz.
Yeah. All right. So it's a soft but formed sausage, and this is what we all are aspiring to. I don't care who you are. Okay. This is one of your life goals, is the regular release of a Bulsiewicz 4, a Bristol 4, into that toilet bowl. Now, 5 is where it's getting kind of mushy, almost like a cow pie. 6 is a plop, and 7 is water. So as you move from 5 to 7, we're getting into diarrhea. So here's the real story, Chuck. The Bristol Stool Scale is not just 7 types of poop. The Bristol Stool Scale tells a story about your gut transit, how quickly you are moving things through. But there's more.
Oh, but wait, there is more.
Yeah, because
What
that's the
more is there?
well, look, a superficial story, that's a weak, cheap TV show, right? But if you want to be The Wire, you need depth. If you want to be Game of Thrones, you need depth to the story, right? There needs to be more. We need to be able to double click and go deeper. So let's do that right now, because the Bristol Stool Scale in each of these 7 types has actually been shown to be indicative of what's happening in your microbiome. What people need to understand is that there's the extremes, right? There's Bristol 1, there's Bristol 7, right? And then in the middle is the Bristol 4. Guess who has the healthiest microbiome?
I'm guessing you, sir, seeing as though it's named after you. But 4 is kind of the sweet spot, and that's probably going to be people who eat a really nice, diverse diet that's got a ton of fiber in it. Correct?
Yes. So the Bristol 4 is actually the healthiest microbiome, and as you deviate away, you are changing the microbiome on some level. And so you are moving towards, like, for example, the Bristol 1, that is a very slow transit. You are sucking the water out of that poop, drying it out, turning it into a rock. This is why you feel like you're birthing a child. And this tends to be in association with a microbiome that is flipped into protein fermentation. And then with the diarrhea, there's also changes that exist. So, like Bristol 7, this is the diarrhea poop. There's changes that have occurred in the microbiome as well that are not beneficial. So the point is that you can actually tell, like, yes, you can do a microbiome test, but you can actually tell quite a bit based upon the Bristol Stool Scale. But actually, Chuck, we could go even deeper than that if you want.
Let's keep digging, baby. Let's go.
Okay. So there's something called the blue poop test. So this was done by my colleagues at Zoe years ago. It was published in the journal Gut in 2021. And basically, here's what they did. They started originally with blue muffins. It's now evolved to be blue cookies. It frankly doesn't matter whether it's a muffin or the cookie. Choose your preferred carb. Choose your preferred carb. But basically, what you do is you take the right amount of blue food dye. That blue food dye does not get absorbed. So it will show up in your bowel movement. So you basically eat this, in this case, it's muffins. They would eat these blue muffins and they would mark the clock. Okay, time has started. And then they go about their business and time elapses. And then all of a sudden they look down in the toilet bowl. The fuck?
Oh dear. Okay. A little bit of the Blue Man Group happening in the bowl, are we? I'm trying to cover for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They look down and they see something unexpected. There's a blue poop.
Yep.
How much time has elapsed between the 2 times, start and finish? That's your gut transit time. And what they actually found is that this simple do-it-yourself test that you can do at home, basically costs you nothing. You just need some blue food dye and a muffin, is actually even better than the Bristol Stool Scale at predicting your gut microbiome and what the makeup of that is. It can actually predict what your visceral fat levels are. It actually tells information about how you respond to different foods in terms of your blood sugar, your blood fat response. It actually is associated with cardiometabolic risk. Okay. And it's better than how often you go. It's better than your Bristol Stool Scale. So the reason why is because it's a more direct measure of gut transit, and gut transit is really the more important story. Not how often you go, not your Bristol Stool Scale, but the gut transit is really what we're trying to get here. And so what they found is that longer transit times had more protein fermenting bacteria, as you and I were discussing a moment ago, and this was associated with worse metabolic health. Whereas the people who had the sweet spot, they had gut microbes that were most associated with fiber fermentation. And this was also, by the way, associated with lower cardiometabolic risk. So, in other words, protecting your heart, protecting your metabolism.
What is the ideal transit time, by the way?
Well, so in this particular study, what they were looking at was normal transit time was somewhere between 14 and 59 hours. Okay, so 59 hours is going to be a little over 2 days, but not yet 3 days. And 14 hours is like if you're pooping in less than 14 hours with something that you just ate, then that's real fast. That's not even a day, right? So, but classically, what we think about Chuck is that it's normal to poop every about once a day or every other day. That's what we classically think about.
Especially like the blue food dye. I remember being a kid and the local ice cream store in Norfolk, Virginia had Superman ice cream. And it was about as blue could be. And I remember like pooping out blue and actually being freaked out, man. I had that the fuck kind of reaction you were talking about. Scared the crap out of me, pardon the pun.
I mean, pun accepted.
Punny, I don't know
uh,
where to go with the conversation. It's just a fact, man.
well, look, I mean, I'm not here advocating for people to regularly consume blue food dye. That is not what this conversation is about. Doing it on one occasion for the sake of like understanding your gut transit time, I don't personally think that you're going to wreck your gut microbiome. I think what's wrecking your gut microbiome is that bag of Skittles that you're consuming on a regular basis. Totally different story.
Yeah, no
So,
kidding.
but a couple quick takeaways though, Chuck, before we move on.
Yeah.
The ways in which you slow your gut transit to get to this place of constipation, which we've now discussed is associated with protein fermentation, is associated with the production of these uremic toxins that can affect your brain, affect your kidneys. Some of the things that are associated with slow gut transit are low fiber, right? Because fiber, as I've mentioned earlier, is what maintains the rhythm. So if you cut out the fiber, you're going to bonk, you're going to screw up your rhythm. Dehydration, because you need water to keep things, basically you want to keep that river flowing down the stream. You don't want it to be drying up on the rocks. Okay. Sedentary lifestyle, that like when you move, your gut moves too. When you stop moving, your gut stops moving too. And last is stress. Stress can like paralyze. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. What's happening
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
Paralyzing the gut.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, literally, dude, what are you gonna tell me is next? That, like, if you transplant somebody's poop into another person's poop, you can give them this whole new body?
Well, funny that you should say that, Chuck, because there's actually a very interesting report that came out a few years ago on that exact topic.
Poop transplant? I know we've talked about fecal transplants, but I didn't know that this was all the rage.
Yeah, so this is like the dark side of fecal transplants, and we can fully unpack this because I don't want to misrepresent. This is literally a case report.
The dark side of fecal. It sounds like a true Hollywood story. The dark side of fecal transplants.
Here we are. We're doing a review on what people need to hear on this topic.
Yeah,
So this
man.
is this is what can go horribly wrong if you get the wrong poop.
Let's
Um,
go.
There's actually a story. So again, this is a case report. We don't want to overstate this. And before I dive into this, let me also say that the case that I'm about to discuss, it picks up in 2011, which was 15 years ago, and we have since actually had the approval by the FDA of products that are designed specifically to serve the purpose that we're discussing. So it's not as much of the Wild West as it used to be. So back in 2011, I was a GI fellow, and I don't know if I ever told you this, Chuck. We had a Vitamix down
It,
in the endoscopy suite.
I'm assuming you weren't making smoothies, or at least the kind of smoothie I would be interested in drinking.
We were making the brownest smoothie.
No. Nope.
Had,
Tapping out
it
instantly,
was a
brother. I want no part of this.
this is a
None.
chocolate smoothie,
None.
Chuck,
No.
but it didn't smell
No.
like chocolate.
If it ain't cacao, I'm passing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, there was no dairy being added to this one, but it was yet it was a moo moo brown cow.
Yeah.
um, so back then, look, let me frame this. We were desperate. I've talked about this actually in my books. We were desperate because there's an infection that was on the rise at this time called C. difficile. And C. difficile lives inside of many of us, but when we have a healthy microbiome, that healthy microbiome will actually suppress it. Not an issue. Like it's there and it does nothing, and you don't need to fear it because it can't hurt you, except if you take antibiotics that totally wipe out your microbiome. So now the healthy microbes are absent. There's no one to actually hold back the C. diff anymore. So the C. diff sees its opportunity, and like a deranged lunatic breaking out of jail, it just goes bonkers and takes over your colon, causes inflammation of the colon, which we call colitis. The colitis can progress literally to the point of being life-threatening. So in the beginning of Plant Powered Plus, in the introduction, I discussed a patient called Michelle. Her name was Michelle. And this is like basically her story on some level, where she took an antibiotic, the C. diff took over, and it put her into a position of having a life-threatening infection. And back in the day, back in this time, up to 30,000 people per year were dying from C. diff infection. That's more than most cancers. There's very few cancers that are more than 30,000 deaths per year. So this was like a very, very serious issue. And us, the medical doctors, particularly the gastroenterologists, we're on the front lines trying to deal with this. So what we started doing was fecal transplant. We discovered that if you install a fresh microbiome, that you can actually immediately like recreate the ecosystem that's necessary to suppress the C. diff. And when that C. diff gets suppressed, that deranged lunatic gets put back in its jail cell. Door gets closed, key gets taken out. Then everything just kind of settles down. The immune system cools off. The inflammation goes away. The body gets back to normal. So a fecal transplant can do quite miraculous things for these people. But back then, we would have someone who was like an identified donor, and they would bring a poop with them on the day of the fecal transplant. And we would fire up the Vitamix and create our poop milkshake that would be passed through cheesecloth. And then during a colonoscopy, you basically like get all the way through the colon, and then you have this, fecal solution that you have pulled up into a 60 cc syringe, 60 milliliters, and you basically like inject it. And you have a whole bunch of these syringes lined up, and you work your way through the colon, and you are basically releasing this fecal transplant. By the way, my apologies to everyone who's having their breakfast right now. And
Yeah, that's kind of gross. But yeah, that is kind of gross. For the purpose of those who are listening or aren't familiar with the 60 milliliter syringe, think about like if you just take your two thumbs and you kind of put them together like this, and then you picture like two more thumbs on top of that. That's going to be about 60 milliliters. Just eyeballing it roughly. I think that that's a pretty good assessment. That's not a lot. I honestly thought that when you said, "Hey, we're going to talk about this," when you're talking about like a fecal transplant, I thought it was going to be like a full turd. Like a full turd is way more than 60 milliliters, way more than the slurry that you're talking about injecting.
well, and we're not just doing 60 milliliters. I mean, we're doing multiple of those 60 milliliter syringes. Like
There it
basically,
is.
we get
Okay.
them lined up. Yeah, we get them lined up, and then you release them as you go through the colon. But that being said, no, we're not like literally taking a turd and trying to figure out how to transfer that turd into a person. So, and for what it's worth, one of the new FDA approved products is called Voust, VOWST, and it actually is capsule based. So
Mm.
a person takes antibiotics for the C. diff infection, and then they flip over and they start taking this, and this actually starts to repopulate their gut microbiome to suppress the C. diff. Let's get back on the story though, because the
Yeah,
story
man.
here.
Let's go back to the dark side.
Okay, this is not actually my patient. I was like framing this as me as a GI fellow using this Vitamix. So ignore that for a moment. And let's go out to California, which is where I believe this happened. And it was a 32-year-old woman who she had a recurrent C. diff infection that they were struggling to get rid of. And so they actually lined her up for a fecal transplant, and her daughter was the donor. So many times you back then, rather than having these FDA approved products, you would have to identify a donor, and it was pretty typical that we would identify a family member, and that family member would basically bring a poop, and we would then transfer that poop into the person.
Mm.
So now it turns out that her daughter is overweight. This woman, she is not overweight. She has a body mass index of 26, which is like technically above normal, but like right on the edge of normal. Okay. So, and she receives this fecal transplant. And within 2 days, much like Michelle in my book, within 2 days, she's better. And she leaves the hospital and she goes home. And at that time, she weighed 136 pounds. And then she comes back months later. Okay. And she says to them, I don't know what's going on, but I'm gaining weight. She's up from 136 to 170 pounds. Now, she's not particularly tall, so her body mass index went from 26, which is pretty darn close to normal. 25 is normal. From 25 to 30 is considered overweight. So hers was 26. It went to 33, which is obese. That's clinically obese. And she couldn't explain why she was gaining weight. She didn't feel like she had changed anything in her life. So her doctors put her on a medically supervised diet and an exercise program, and it completely fails. She keeps gaining weight. 3 years after the transplant, she weighs 177 pounds. Her body mass index is now 34.5, which is getting very, very close to, she's not just obese, she's borderline morbidly obese. 35 is the cutoff for morbid obesity. Nothing that they could do could try to reverse this. Now, again, this is a case report, one person. Here we are 15 years later. But the reason why this set off alarm signals for us is that at this time, when this was occurring, we already had multiple studies, Chuck, where you could transfer obesity through poop in mice. So they had shown numerous times that if you take the microbiome of an obese mouse and transfer it into another mouse, that mouse becomes obese. They even had shown, Chuck, that if you take the microbiome of an obese human and transfer it into a mouse, that mouse becomes obese. They had even shown, Chuck, going one layer deeper, that in identical twins, where one is skinny and one is obese, humans, identical twins, one is skinny, one is obese, that when you transfer the poop into two mice, the one that gets the skinny poop is skinny, the one that gets the obese poop becomes obese. They're eating the exact same food. They're eating the exact same number of calories. So the point is that it seems that poop is so powerful that it could potentially impact our metabolism in this way that we're discussing.
So what is actually in the poop that causes this to happen, and what happens to the person? Like so, the woman in the case study you're referencing reported not changing anything else. It sounds like everything in her diet and her lifestyle stayed consistent, yet the weight came on. And so I'm wondering though, like, well, is that actually the case? Did her appetite increase? Did her cravings for junk food increase because she had her overweight daughter's, microbiome inserted into her? Like, I don't know. Like, what mechanistically was actually going on inside the body that caused these changes, or do we even know?
Well, we don't know with total clarity, right? So we're just levying our best guess as to what's happening. Because once again, to be clear and to be fair, we have not proven that fecal transplant was the cause of obesity in this woman. We haven't proven that. But what we're making is a compelling argument because she received the fecal transplant. She claims that she changed nothing else. And then she developed stubborn obesity after receiving the microbiome transplant from her daughter who was overweight.
Mm.
And that once again, we have also seen in um, these animal model studies that actually poop can transfer this property of obesity. So, but some of the things that we do know, Chuck, is that the gut microbiome does have a direct impact on several different factors within your metabolism. It impacts your blood sugar after a meal. It impacts your blood fat after meals. It impacts inflammation. That is like we just basically have touched on the surface of like what the focus of Plant Powered Plus, my new book, is all about. Inflammation is very strongly tied to obesity, and we think is not just the result from obesity, that actually it is a contributor to the manifestation of obesity. That the gut microbiome also is responsible for producing gut hormones that affect our ability to feel full after a meal. So a change in the gut microbiome can affect the release of things like the GLP-1 type drugs, right, which are semaglutide and all the new ones that are coming out. Um, the gut microbiome is thought to potentially affect our cravings. So, for example, specific to chocolate, there's some data that the gut microbes will produce this one particular chemical that you will detect in the blood of people who crave chocolate. And they'll admit it. I crave chocolate. I love chocolate. I can't get enough. And you can detect this chemical that is produced by the gut microbes in their bloodstream, but you can't detect that specific chemical in the bloodstream of the person who's like, yeah, whatever, chocolate, not a big deal. I'm not
Right
too
on.
into it. So the point being, like, there is the possibility that this is like all quite powerfully connected.
Yeah, and just to underscore the word powerful there, like this woman, she went on a medically supervised liquid diet with exercise to boot, and she still could not lose the weight. If you're on a medically supervised liquid protein diet, that is designed for you to lose weight and your body's still holding on to the calories. That to me tells me that we are really on to something with this research, and that the microbiome, your poo, is super, super, super powerful. And correct me if I'm wrong, like you smart doctor types and researchers, y'all are definitely getting in on this now. Isn't there, like we were joking about a poop vault earlier, but is there not honestly like an agency, a group somewhere that is doing nothing but storing, collecting, analyzing different fecal samples from around the world?
There's actually two, believe it or
Oh,
not.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the theory that has emerged is that there's been like um ecologically mass extinction events that are occurring across the globe, right? So, like, species are disappearing, and once the species is gone, you never get it back. And it's one thing to lose biodiversity across the globe, which of course is horrible, and all of us should be pushing back against that. But it's another thing to lose biodiversity within your personal gut ecosystem, because that loss of biodiversity, you might be losing a critical piece of the puzzle for your health as a human. So the entire idea here is that these researchers, some of them are up at MIT, and these other ones are the ones that are up in the Arctic. And the general idea is that they believe that humanity requires these microbes that we evolved with as hunters and gatherers. So they're trying to collect as many of these microbes as they can as quickly as possible before they're gone, and store them in the event that we discover that as we continue to evolve, this mass extinction that seems to be occurring in our fiber deprived, ultra processed diets, that we can try to restore those in the future if we need to. So, and the Arctic one is kind of interesting because what they've done there, it actually started first with seeds because there was a loss of biodiversity in plants. And they said, well, we can't afford to like lose all these plants. So let's start collecting seeds and we'll store them. It's almost like an Austin Powers style thing, like cryogenically. We're going to store these seeds in the Arctic so that in the future we have the ability to regrow these plants. It almost sounds like Wally, to be honest with you. But once they started doing that, they're like, "Oh, we should do this with poop specimens too." So now we got a cold chamber poop specimen vault.
That's fine, Wally. Pixar saving the next generation of humanity. So if somebody wants to rebuild that right now on the Bristol Bulsiewicz scale, they're like dropping ones, twos, maybe the occasional three, but they want to get to that four sweet spot. They want to protect their poop, man. Let's heal the gut. Where should we really look to start here?
Well, let's start with the low hanging fruit, which is what we've kind of been discussing during the show. And the low hanging fruit may actually be fruit or fiber rich food
Yeah.
like kiwis.
Ooh,
Yeah.
you and your kiwi.
So kiwis have been shown with total clarity, multiple human studies at this point, to show that kiwi fruit, green kiwi fruit, can actually accelerate gut transit times. And part of it is the fiber. It also has unique types of fiber that seem to really draw in water and almost become spongy. And that sort of drawn in water, spongy, that's how you contribute to a really, really great, healthy bowel movement. So, one of the ways that in which we can treat constipation is actually through the regular consumption of green kiwi fruit. Now, you, of course, can and should, whenever possible, consume the kiwis, but it's not a coincidence, this research that we're discussing, because as I was formulating daily microbiome nutrition for 38 Terra, which is meant to be the ultimate prebiotic fiber supplement, it's no coincidence that I opted for one of the key ingredients to be this green kiwi fruit. So there's an ingredient called actazin. Actazin is literally they're just taking kiwis and they're grinding them down into a powder. That's it. There's no complex extractions or anything like that. Still contains the digestive enzymes that exist in kiwis, contains this fiber, and it's actually been shown that the amount that we have in DMN is actually the right amount to help to achieve the same effect that you would see by eating 2 kiwi fruit on a daily basis. So yes, eat kiwi fruits, do it regularly. Opt for fiber in your diet. That needs to be the absolute top priority. I also don't think it's wrong to acknowledge that the daily consumption of a high quality supplement like 38 Terra DMN can help us to achieve our goals of like basically maintaining this rhythm. So that's like to me the starting point. That's the low hanging fruit.
What about for those people who are on medication? And I'm talking about more than just antibiotics. I mean, we have had to have by now studied the effect that various types of medication have had on the gut microbiome. What do we know?
There was a major paper in the journal Nature in the year 2018 where they looked at 40 specific gut bacterial species and the impact of close to 1,200 different drugs. So it's not a complete human microbiome. It's not a human study. It's focusing, zooming in on these 40 gut species that are quite important to us and looking at the impact of 1,200 different drugs. And what they actually found, Chuck, is that about 1 in 4 of these drugs. So think about that. Starting with 1,200, we're around 300 right now. 300 drugs were shown to actually impact at least one of the strains. And some
Mm.
of the ones where they saw the biggest impact were the proton pump inhibitors that people use for acid reflux or an upset stomach, metformin, which is a drug that people use for type 2 diabetes, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, things like Prozac and Paxil, which are being used to treat major depression or generalized anxiety disorder, and the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, which are being used to treat, pain type issues. So these things we need to be aware they can impact the microbiome. This is not an argument for people to say, oh, well, I'm going to stop that right now. Please don't. But this is an argument to say that it's important for us to address the root of our issues and not just accept a life where we're completely and totally dependent on medication for the rest of our life.
Not lost on me here that a lot of the drugs that you were just mentioning are ones that people are on for a long stretch, not just short term. Oh, I've got a bellyache. Let me take this for a day or two. These are medications that people stay on for months, sometimes years, if not longer.
Well, because there's a story there, Chuck. So, like this, basically, what you're touching on is the impact of consistency on the microbiome. When you do something with consistency, it has a much bigger effect than if you do something without consistency. So coffee consumed consistently can impact the microbiome because every single day it's doing a little nudge. But your medications are done with consistency because you're taking them every day. So every single day, there's a little nudge in some direction. Let's hope that that's a good direction, but in some cases, it may not be. So we just need to be aware of that.
And let me kind of wrap up today also by talking about constipation. I want to circle back to that. I also talked about it a lot with your friend, Dr. Tricia Pescara. Correct
As we
me.
check.
Yeah, Pesricha. Forgive me.
Yeah.
She's got this great book out called "You've Been Pooping All Wrong." And we got to talking about pooping positions. And I told her the story of an ex-girlfriend's friend. Actually, this was my ex-girlfriend's roommate at the time, who like would get up. let me do the full example here
Oh,
for
dear.
the benefit of people who are watching at home. Now, I will
Okay.
tell you first.
For those who are listening, Chuck is now standing.
I am
Please don't
on a
fall. Please don't
on a
fall.
so
Okay.
what I'm
Well,
trying
oh
not
dear.
to I'm trying to demonstrate.
Okay.
Imagine this office chair is a toilet.
Yeah.
She is not sitting on the toilet, nor am I sitting on the office chair how most people would sit on the office chair. I am actually squatting on top of the office chair. And this is how the woman would poop. She would get on top of the toilet, Dr. B, and grip it with her toes around the bowl and squat like this, almost in a Zen like position where she would meditate and drop a Bulsiewicz. She swore by this. I think it's incredibly dangerous, but hey, what do I know? I don't live on the edge of life, nor a toilet bowl for that
Chuck,
matter.
have you ever noticed that in our society, the person that we call a genius, at one point we called them crazy?
Dude, I don't know. There's no way that anybody who squats on a raised toilet like this is ever going to get the genius standard. Now, I know where you're going to go with this. But you can get a toilet that is on the damn ground where you don't have to risk like boom putting your foot in the bowl or sliding off in case that the bowl's a little bit wet. Ew. I'm just saying there are safer ways to do this.
I accept your pushback on some level, but I also want to, as a gastroenterologist, do a quick tip of the cap to this young lady
Ah,
who I think was ahead of her time and understood some things that we all need to understand. Here's what you need to know. It turns out that when we're like going about our daily routines, standing, sitting in upright 90-degree angles, that our rectum is actually folded over upon itself. And that's meant to be an extra layer of protection so you don't do what? Poop your pants. Right. We managed to talk about poop for 55 minutes, and it took me until now to finally say poop your pants. All right. Nonetheless, the rectum is folded over upon itself for an extra layer of protection because it's hard to take that sharp turn for the poop. So you want to straighten it out. And the way that we straighten out the rectum and create a clean luge, right? A chute, right?
clean luge.
A luge that just like it's that ice that's just flowing downhill nice and
Welcome to
smooth.
the bathroom Olympics, everybody.
All right. The way that you accomplish that is by getting into a squatted position. The squatted position actually relaxes the muscles that you need to relax to straighten out the rectum, reduce straining, and create a clear shot for that missile to fire. All right. So sitting toilets are an engineering convenience. They are not the way that we are designed biologically. This young lady is a genius.
No,
You
no,
call her
no.
crazy. I say she's a genius.
No, she's the daredevil of dung. Listen, here's the thing. If you want to squat like that, you get one of those toilets that they have in other countries that are literally on the ground, or you dig a hole in the backyard. You do not hop up on the toilet yourself and risk life and limb to drop a Bolsewitz. These are things that you just do not do.
May the
Not a
record reflect that if I come to your house and I find a hole dug in the backyard, I know what you're doing, Chuck. All
I
right.
got all kinds of woods out back, man. I can hide turds and bodies. Nobody's going to find either.
I'm a bit disturbed as we come to the end of this episode. I wasn't disturbed until now, but you managed to get me there, buddy.
I've been watching too much true crime on Netflix, man. What can I say?
Let's bring it home, Chuck, because I
Yeah,
know we
bring it
covered a
home,
lot of
brother.
ground here today, but
Yeah.
we've talked about what poop actually is, how fast it moves. We've talked about how transplanting it into people can potentially have wild impacts. So I want to make sure that everyone steps away today with something they can do. Number one, look before you flush. I'm being totally serious. Your poop tells a story. You can see the Bristol Stool Scale, not the Bulsiewicz scale, the Bristol Stool Scale, which is the story of your transit time, but it also is the story of your microbiome that's actually sitting in there. So you need to be aware of that. Number two, you can track your transit, not just your frequency, not just the Bristol stool type. You could potentially do the blue poop challenge. And if you do this, then you're going to understand more about your gut microbiome, about your cardiometabolic risk, about your visceral fat levels, about all these different factors than you would be able to get from just looking at the poop by itself. So there's an opportunity there. Number three, we need to remember that your 55% of your poop, it wants to be fed, and it wants to be fed its preferred meal, which is fiber. So we need to make sure that we are focusing on fiber in our diet. We get this by focusing on the variety of plant-based foods in our diet. Opt for the low-hanging fruit, which is literally fruit, plus vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, even mushrooms. They all count.
I just know after today's conversation, people are going to be asking, do I need a poop transplant? What would you say to somebody who's wondering that?
After hearing the dark side of poop transplants, you still want one? Are you sure?
We got daredevils. Have we not learned anything else today? We've got daredevils.
Look, the solution, the poop transplant is not the likely solution to most of the problems that people have. The likely solution is to change your diet and lifestyle to be more friendly to these microbes. And it's the basics. They're not as sexy as some of the things that we may discuss out there. These are not peptides, but fiber, hydration, movement, time spent outdoors, dealing with stress. This is how we get our microbes into a friendly place that allow us to get our gut into a rhythm.
I tell you what, man, I never thought I would say this, but when I do my business here in a little while, I'm going to take a look. I'm going to give it a peep and see what's doing in the bowl.
Chuck, you should. Honestly, it's the cheapest gut health test that you'll ever take, and it tells you a lot of what you're looking to know. And you know what I'm doing today, Chuck?
What are you going to do, sir?
I'm going to practice my balance on a toilet bowl.
I tell you, let's do a couple of poofies. All right, that's a poop selfie, right? We'll just, and then we'll post it on the Instagram. Huh? How about that?
Sounds great.
Anyway, Dr. B, on that note, if this episode has changed the way that you think about your gut, share it, my friends. Send it to someone who needs to hear this, and make sure that you're subscribed to us right here on YouTube so that you don't miss what's coming next. And Dr. B, as always, thank you for making number 2 number 1 in our hearts.
Thanks, Chuck. Now go check your poop.